Welcome everyone. Nathalie from the Beekeeping Association, or the Hays County Beekeepers, is going to be presenting today, and we're very happy to have her back.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start by announcing the title of this presentation, which is basically Easy Beekeeping for All. And we're going to discuss a little bit how you can get into beekeeping on a budget without breaking the bank, and keep it simple, and so that all ages and all sizes or physical ability people or all finances level people can access beekeeping easily. So I am with the Hays County Beekeepers Association. I'm the vice president. I've been beekeeping for about 7 years, and I'm at the advanced level at the Master Beekeeper program of the Texas A&M University. And I've even beekept in Africa for a little bit, and we work mostly with natural beekeeping and tabar hives, horizontal hives. So I'm going to talk about all this stuff. And for some reason, oh, there we go. So let's start by a brief introduction about what bees do in nature and how do they organize their nests. Usually they're opportunistic, so they'll find a cavity either in a vertical tree or in a house structure or a tree that's fallen off, but just basically a cavity that's big enough for them to store food and grow their babies in their brood nests. And they will typically place their honey, they will start building from the ceiling of that cavity and progress down as they store food, and the queen lays eggs, and the brood's nest, the baby's nest, expands. So they will start again at the ceiling and expand downwards and then sideways a little bit. In the fallen horizontal cavity, they will go and develop horizontally and vertically as much as the space lets them do that. And their comb, this is an open air hive, so actually they will do that on the outside as well. They don't really care if a hive is, if that cavity is vertical or horizontal, or even if they do that in nature, as long as they have a ceiling above them. Obviously, they will prefer to be encased in a cavity for protection from predators and the elements. So in the 1850s, person named the Reverend Langstroth discovered the concept of bee space. He realized that bees build their comb at equidistant space, meaning they have the same basic space between the combs that's about 3/8 of an inch. That allows them to work back to back on the surface of each of those combs, and no more space than that. So using that concept, Reverend Langstroth decided to leverage that to be able to remove frames and combs, which before, when you were to manipulate a beehive or try to extract anything, comb and honey, keep pushing the button, sorry, they were getting destroyed, and there was no other way to do this. With this discovery, he was able, by respecting that distance, that bee space, to build hives that were using that to have frames that were removable. The tabar hives and the horizontal hives use the same principle, by the way, except that they touch, but we'll get to that. So this is the concept that kind of evolved from discovering that bee space. Reverend Langstroth was able to design a hive that was vertical and stackable, leveraging the use of frames and actual later foundation, which is a support on which the bees build their wax cells. And that gave them a pattern, but also some rigidity, so that they could manipulate those frames a little bit easier. The boxes were modular and stackable, which allowed them to add on as the hive expanded, or to contract in the winter when it shrank. Vertical is really, it's really been developed for commercial reasons, or was leveraged a lot more by commercial beekeepers, so that they could go and stack those boxes, because they're all squares, and they can be transported easily on bed trucks and taken to commercial pollination routes. Thanks to them, we have about a third of our food that's pollinated by those bees. They follow the cycles of forage or of flowering of those crops and travel across the United States. And the concept of that vertical hive is very easily transportable and stackable, which makes it very attractive for the commercial beekeepers. Now, the drawback of those boxes is that they actually get very heavy and complicated. They have those frames come in 3 different sizes, whether they're shallow, medium, or deep. And those boxes also come in those sizes to accommodate whether honey supers or different kind of purposes for lifting less weight when you have the shallower frames, and bird's nests at the bottom of the hive for the bees to keep. And also they come in different widths. This one at the bottom left is 10 frame, then you have an 8 frame, then you have 5 frame. And when you're not using, first of all, you have to build all that equipment, and then you have to store it when you're not using it. So those boxes require a whole lot of storage space. And so these unused frames after they've been extracted, so that you need a lot of storage space to do that on a larger scale. Also, whenever you keep a vertical hive like that, if you're wanting to extract your honey and you're using foundation, you're going to have to use an extractor, most likely, to spin those frames into the extractor, and it becomes very space consuming and labor intensive. This got a lot of moving parts. If you see on the right side, this is like a complete hive. Got various parts for the covers, the base, all the frames coming in, and it requires a lot of complicated management where you have to swap boxes depending on the season or what's going on in your hive. So it's got advantages, but it also is very expensive, heavy, and complicated. The supers of honey that you see in yellow usually are at the top of the hive, and a 10 frame full super, deep super will hold about 100 pounds of honey when it's well filled. And when you're picking that up and twisting your back and putting it down and lifting for various reasons, then it can really take a toll on your back. So it's hard for people that don't have the physical abilities, and it's also hard for people that don't have the financial means or the space to store all that equipment. I would also add it is more complicated to manage, so it makes it harder for the average person to beekeep that way. Now, introducing the concept of the horizontal hive, and if you remember the image of the hive open air that was expanding sideways and downwards, well, this hive is leveraging the concept of horizontal expansion that they do naturally in natural horizontal cavities. And instead of having frames that are separated, those bars is just a single bar at the top, very easy, just a piece of wood, and every bar is touching, forming a roof over the head of the colony. So you don't have to open it all the way and stress the bees and exposing the entire bird's nest. Each bar is only 7 to 8 pounds, not really heavy to lift. And then you can adjust that hive body to the height that fits either shorter persons, even children, or people with physical limitations. And it's also protecting your back if you have issues with that as well. And trust me, if you don't have any back issues and you use the vertical hives with those heavy lifting, eventually you will have back issues. So the concept is very simple. Just like the colony is hanging their natural comb off of the ceiling of the cavity or the ceiling, the bees will build their combs from a bar that they use as a ceiling. And because we're also leveraging the bee space we were talking about, all of a sudden those bars are removable easily, and you can manipulate and do what you need to do, including extraction. It makes for a beautiful natural comb of honey, or for the bird's nest, which is healthier for them, by the way. And it's got higher financial value or just pleasure value, because eating honeycomb fresh like this is really a delicacy, and it commands a lot higher price for if you're selling it. Okay, some examples of tabar hives. You can make them as simply as with some sticks and cover it in cow dung and just kind of bamboo or any basic material that you can find in nature. And as long as you respect that bee space, you're going to be able to remove those frames and control those. The advantage of in Africa, especially in Africa, is that you can come in from the back of the hive and access just the honeycombs without disrupting the rest of the brood's nest, meaning the bees are a lot calmer when you're going in and don't really get upset. You can make it out of barrels. You can make it out of really nice cedar wood. You can make it out of just regular pine lumber. And it's really easy to make. And again, the principle is overarchingly the same, where you end up with a bar and a comb attached to it. And what I really like personally is that you can put that comb flat on that hive, and that makes kind of like a built-in stand where you can look at your bees without even touching the comb. So again, the main advantages is that comparatively speaking, it can be extremely cheap. You can actually build them with recuperated wood, reclaimed wood, or you can build them with some pine wood that's fairly easy, or some sticks and bamboo. It's easy not only to build, but it's also easy to manage. Because of there's only management in the horizontal plan instead of being both in the vertical and the horizontal plan. The other advantage, which makes it even more cost interesting, is that it can hold 2 colonies in a single box. By putting a partition in the center, you can have a colony on each side with each their own entrances. So instead of having to buy or build 2 different hives, one for each of the colonies, now you only have one. And so that's another advantage. There is no heavy lifting. Again, Les Crowder, who is the tabar hive guru, is here in this picture holding 1 bar, which is 1 hand, which you cannot do really unless you have like a single frame that you pull out of a vertical hive. No storage of equipment. Those bars are all you need. Once you have built that hive and you have all the bars in there, you will never need an extra bar. You can just, if you're collecting your honey, instead of having to remove that frame and putting another one in to replace it immediately, because otherwise, by the way, the bees will build on empty ceiling and then you'll have a mess in the vertical hive. While in a horizontal hive, you can just take that bar, cut that comb in your bucket, and then put that bar right back in. It also makes it easy to collect just as much as you need, instead of having to collect a whole super. So there's no storage. And on top of that, it really encourages natural comb, which is better for the bees. And it's also healthier and renews their brood's nests and keeps it cleaner. So why is natural wax important to the bees? Well, because when they build colonies in the wild, they will use that natural shape with natural cell sizes based upon their needs. It will always follow this shape, which is called a catenary curve, which is a mathematical curve that's, when you're holding a rope or a string, it will naturally make that shape. And there's a reason for that. There's a structural reason for that. And it also allows a better communication through the comb, because the bees communicate through vibration. And when you have foundation in a frame in a vertical hive, then that gets dampened, and it really takes away from the health of the colony, because they're not able to communicate as well where their food sources are and any kind of issues they have. The natural cell size allows them to grow drones, male bees, and expand and contract as they need. There's no expensive or toxic foundation in that, and no expensive extractor is needed, because you can just harvest that comb and crush it and strain it in a bucket. You can crush it in a bucket and then strain it with easy kitchen colanders or potato masher or a spoon. It's really very easy and cheap to do to extract your honey that way. And because again, you come from the edges of the colony, when you get into a tabar hive, it makes for calmer colonies. They barely notice that you're there. So this is what a comb on the bar looks like. So it's really more than about honey as well. A lot of times beekeepers keep bees so that they can extract some honey, liquid honey. But with a tabar hive, you can have a lot more than just honey, because you get access to that natural comb that you can just cut and collect without damaging it. And you can extract, you can put it and sell it for a lot more than you would liquid honey. Just as is, just pure comb, or you can put it in liquid honey, that's called chunk honey, and that's also more valuable than just liquid honey. So you can't really do that when you have a regular vertical hive unless you're going foundationless, and in a vertical hive it becomes kind of complicated to do that because the bees tend to cross comb a little bit more between the frames. Okay, so if you are interested in getting into beekeeping cheaply and easily, you can find, and these are Les Crowther's plans. They're available for free on the internet and in his book. But basically what you're going to need is some plans and some tools. So here, these plans are very simple. All you need is a board. This is a 2x10, and you cut it in 3 equal parts. And then you have the ends that are basically what is it called, trapezoidal, trapezies, and you assemble that. And the next thing that you need is going to be some bars that you're going to cut and form the ceiling with. All the bars are going to touch, and that's going to be the ceiling of your hive. So really easy, simple plans. Anybody can, with like basic woodworking skills, can build those. When I first started building those, I didn't have any woodworking skills, and it really didn't take me very long with some basic tools to assemble some beautiful and simple hives. So to build one hive, all you need is a little bit of wood and a rain cover, and we use corrugated tin for that, but you can use scraps. You can buy all this, and you can add on as you go and make it more complex with like specific entrances and all stuff, but the basics are very simple. And one of those 2x4x10s is going to be used for the body of the hive, and then the other one's going to be used to cut bars, and then you're going to have that roof on top, and then in the body you're going to drill some holes, and that's basically it at its simplest. So if you can find these as scraps, that could potentially be a free hive for you. So that makes it very cost interesting. And if you're buying the materials, you can potentially make one for $50. I mean, that's, I think, what we had priced it as when we were initially starting. You're going to need tools. And if you don't have those tools, you don't have to necessarily buy them. There's plenty of people that have those tools around that can lend them to you. And so you could ask to use that and not pay for any kind of tool costs. So you're going to need a table saw that's going to allow you to cut the bars themselves, because you don't want to do it with a circular saw. You might end up with no fingers left. So it's a good idea to have access to a table saw. Even if you're buying them, they're not hugely expensive. If you're going to make a lot of hives, I would recommend you invest in one of those. And so that's going to be for the bars, and also to bevel the bottom of the body of the hive. And then you're going to need a certain kind of slice each of those sides of the hive, each of those components of the body of the hive. And then you're going to need, if you're using the tin metal roof, some tin snips to cut it to dimension. And basically you can use a power drill to assemble with some screws, or if you don't have a power drill, you can also use hammer and nails. It's just a little bit harder and more cumbersome, but that's also lower budget, so low cost. That's kind of like the topic of this presentation. And then you have to assemble those pieces. Once you've cut them, like the two ends and the bottom and the two sides, all you need to do is drill them in. And it's so simple and easy that even children can do it. So you can then add the bars on top of it, and that's going to form the roof over the brood's nest, over the combs of the bees. And that's basically the whole principle. The only thing else that you do is drilling a hole at the entrance for them to come in and out of, and that's basically it. Easy, simple to build, cheap to build. Voila. This one has legs, so I added some 2x4s to make some legs, but you could set it up on cinder blocks or even on anything that's you're going to have to set it up above the ground so that ants don't really get into it and so that the wood doesn't rot out underneath. But other than that, you could suspend it in a tree like they do in Africa. And this is before the roof is on, and you can see the bars are all touching. There's an entrance right here on the right side. And then to finish it off, we put the tin metal roof cover on top of it. And you can secure it with heavy stones or with straps. So really low tech and easy. The other thing that I really like, and that's also making it very cheap and interesting cost-wise, is to add a partition in the center and another entrance on the other end. So you have two entrances, one on each side, one here and one there. And then you can put one colony on one side and another completely different colony on the other side. And by the way, if you do things like ag exemptions, where you need a certain number of colonies per acres, like for 5 acres, you would need 6 colonies in Texas, and you can get an ag exemption after 5 years. Well, one of these hives would allow you with a partition to have 2 of those colonies. So if you needed 6 colonies on your land, then you get 3 of those and you're good to go with the bees in there. And then you can get creative, and that's also another thing. You can make them really pretty, you can paint them, you can stain them. I created a special deluxe cover that lifts up like a little bit like a Ferrari. But again, that's a very simple concept using some tin roof and a little bit more wood and screws. So, you know, the sky's the limit. What I really like also, and that the Langstroth vertical hives don't have, is that there's a lot of airflow on top of those bars. And by using that 2 by 2-inch lumber, which is actually really in reality 1.5-inch thick, you provide a whole lot more, twice as much insulation for your colonies to do better in the summer and in the winter, which is one of the big drawbacks of the Langstroth, is that they're built out of thin lumber, and that makes it hard for the bees to keep their temperatures stable to where they need, whether in the winter or in the summer. So what do you need to get? Again, this is a easy beekeeping on a budget. So you can go as low on the gear that you need as you can, but this would be the strict minimum. If you're not caring about having gloves, you don't have to get them. Expect some stings from time to time, but a lot of the experienced beekeepers don't really get stung, and then they when they do, they're used to it and they don't react anymore. So at the minimum, you're going to need to have, of course, a hive and the bees to put in there, but also the gear, protective gear, PPE, and some basic tools. Basic tools are the smoker. We recommend having one just because it really helps calming the bees down, and that's cost about, you can find one on Amazon for $16-17, and then you have the really nice ones on Dadant and Man, like some suppliers that can cost $45. So it's up to you which kind you want. You're going to need a hive tool, but if you don't have a hive tool, and those are not very expensive, but if like a simple hive tool would work. They're just kind of like a frying bar, almost like a mini crowbar just made for beekeeping. But if you don't have one, a big kitchen knife that you get from, you know, Goodwill or something can do the trick as well. It's just to pry bars that can get sticky, and so that you have something to work the combs with. And then you're going to need something to protect your face. So you really have to protect your face no matter what you do with beekeeping, because even the gentlest colony might at some point send a guard bee that might sting you in the eye. That happens even with the gentlest and the most experienced beekeeper. And if that happens, first of all, you could lose an eye, but also things could escalate really quickly, because after first few stings, the bees give the alarm and you're marked. And so more and more bees might get and sting you. And you don't want it to be in your face, because very quickly they'll go for your nose, your mouth, and your ears and your eyes. That's their natural instinct to defend themselves against mammals. And so that's a big target. So at the very minimum, you want a veil. And I'm just going to show you, it doesn't have to be fancy. This is a mosquito net that you can put on top of a baseball hat. And that makes for a very cheap and convenient veil for you. That's also transportable. You can have a nicer hat with an actual pocket veil. That's a little bit more expensive, but that works also on a budget. And then the next thing, and if you want more protection, you can get one of those jackets. These don't cost very much. You can find them on Amazon or in some of the beekeeping suppliers. And then the next step over, if you want more protection, is to get a full suit that covers both your head and your entire body. The other thing that you might want to get, if you want gloves, is just basically basic dishwashing gloves. They work really well and they're very inexpensive. I think this pair costs about $4. And that's basically it for the protective gear. Now, if you want to protect your investment, if you're going to buy bees, for example, that can get pretty expensive if you're buying them. Then I would recommend having 2 or 3 identical hives. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but in the end, you're protecting your investment, because something might go wrong with that initial colony. And if you don't have a second colony to help fix the issues and troubleshoot and give them resources to help them solve the problems, then you might lose that first colony altogether. So I really recommend, if you can afford it, to a second colony at least. For the bees, you can get them from swarms. It's not a very sure way to get your bees, but it's definitely a free way to get the bees. And you can get, if you're in Texas and especially in Austin, you can get into the Austin swarm list, or wherever you're located, you could just get on the local swarm list if your bee club has one, or you could ask your local beekeepers association if they have a swarm list and get on that. And then you can go and collect those swarms. It requires a little bit of knowledge to do that, but it's not very complicated, and that could allow you to get free bees. We don't like to say free bees, because really you're getting bees for free, but the bees are not free, because you have to put them in the equipment, and there's a certain cost associated to that, and the time it takes for you to get them and all that stuff. Also, you can try to bait a hive to attract them to come to the hive that you've built. It's not a very foolproof way to get bees. So there's other ways to do that. Some suppliers will sell you bees, and one of the cheapest option is to get packages of bees. That's basically 3 pounds of bees that come in with a queen that's been mated, and you put it directly into the box and let them grow in the hive. It's a bit stressful for the bees. They're 4 to 6 weeks behind. They all got shooken up in the package. They have no comb, no food, and they tend to abscond, which means leave altogether. So even if it's cheap, in the range of like $100, it's cheaper compared to other options. $100 per package, well, it still is not the most cost-effective way if you're going to buy bees to do that, because they're behind and they might leave. The way that we recommend to do, if you're going to buy bees, is to invest a little bit more money and go for a nuke. Nuke is a baby colony that basically has got a comb built out usually 4 to 5 bars of comb already built out with food and brood, meaning baby bees coming in, and so their numbers are going to expand a lot faster. The queen is the mother of the colony, and it's a functioning, unstressed, well proven colony, and they're not going to leave either because they're not going to abandon their nest with their babies and their food. So the packages are about $100, $100 to $150, depending on the supplier. Some of them sell them more, and then the nukes, the nucleus colonies, can range from $200 to $350. So it depends what your budget is. You can start with swarm, then packages, then nukes, and then you can also buy full colonies, which is even more expensive. But the topic of this presentation is really to do beekeeping on a budget and easy. So it's up to you how you want to get into this. Okay, so the other thing that you're going to need to do is educate yourself about bee biology, about the superorganism and beekeeping practices and how you manage a colony. And there are a lot of paying classes out there. Some of them are well worth the money. But if you're on a budget, I recommend you look into your local Beekeepers Association. For usually in the United States anyway, they are holding monthly meetings that are free and open to the public. Hays County Beekeepers Association has a meeting every third Wednesday of the month. And right now we're holding it on Zoom every month because we're not meeting in person. So it's accessible to everybody. And because so many clubs are doing that now on Zoom, you can actually access that free education, those free presentations that are very informative usually from different beekeeping clubs around the country. And you can go to 5, 6, 10 a month if you'd like, if you find them and if you find quality ones. What I would recommend though is to focus on a natural beekeeping club, because a lot of the beekeeping clubs out there are promoting treatments, which means putting insecticides, pesticides inside the colony to control some of the pests and pathogens that are can negatively impact the colony. The problem with those is that, first of all, it's somewhat toxic. It creates it can kill the adult bees, it can kill the queen, it can kill the larvae, it can leave residue in your wax, and there's other ways to beekeep naturally that are very efficient, where you don't need to do that. So be very mindful when you're following classes from other beekeeping clubs or YouTube channels or on forums or on Facebook pages, that there's a lot of people promoting treatments, and you don't have to necessarily follow that advice as long as you have a good alternative on how to do this naturally. And if you have questions, the Hays County Beekeepers Association is definitely a natural beekeeping club, and we definitely have the experts and mentors that you need to give you advice on how to do that safely and healthily for your bees and for yourself, and also on how to do top bar beekeeping, which is not necessarily as ubiquitous as the vertical hives. So we have the experience to share there. I highly recommend the meetings, and since it's free, it's not costing you anything to see kind of what it's like and learn a lot of things. The other thing that the Hays County Beekeepers Association does, and a lot of the beekeepers associations out there do, is that they have when you're a member, and membership usually is about $20 a year for a single person, and you can have access to their landing library of beekeeping books. So for example, Hays County Beekeepers Association has over 60 titles that are very pertinent and very good quality on beekeeping education. So that's another resource that you can leverage for free. You're gonna need to know about all the biology and beekeeping basics and all that stuff, and so that's a good source as well. The website is hayscountybeekeepers.com. We also have a Facebook page. We talk about swarms and removals. The meetings are listed usually there. We also have people that can help you with ag exemptions. That's the other thing. Beekeeping can help you get ag exemptions on your land. And specifically in Texas, I don't know what the other states' laws are, but in Texas, if you have a minimum of 5 acres, and if you have a homestead on there, then you're going to need a little bit more, 6 acres. But if you have 5 acres of land, you can get into an ag exemption using beekeeping as a qualifying activity. So that's a very important thing to know, because it can actually save you a lot of money on your taxes on your land. So that's another way to keep the investments that you put into the hives and into the bees, paying for something that you get in return if you have that kind of land. The other thing that the Hays County Beekeepers Association does is that every year we started holding the World Bee Day Natural Beekeeping webinar, which is a 12 hours worth of quality content from very famous beekeepers teaching very important concepts for $45 for the entire 12 hours. So that's another really cool thing. And the thing is that when you're Hays County Beekeepers member, which only costs you $20 or per individual, you get that webinar for free. You get it sent out as part of your membership perks. And you can be all over the country, all over the world, and you'll get access to it just the same way. You can become a Hays County Beekeepers Association member from all over the world. The other thing that I would recommend is, and you can find those again at your association's landing library or at your Dripping Springs library. I don't know if Kelly will let me know if we have these books, but I highly recommend these books. The Complete Idiot's Guide to Beekeeping. I think you can actually read it online for free if you have one of those memberships on Kindle or something. And then the Top Hour Beekeeping is Les Crowder's book, and it really is very pertinent to Top Hour beekeeping management. It has the plans that you saw earlier in the presentation in the book, and it also has his entire management description of how he manages those hives, as well as a lot of very important considerations when it comes to natural beekeeping. So these two, if you start with anything, I would start with the Top Bar Beekeeping and then the Complete Idiot's Guide to Beekeeping. Those are my 2 favorite books by far. And then the Keeping Bees with a Smile is a more general, it's based on another type of hive, but it's also a horizontal hive. And it's really another really great book to discuss this. So I've talked a lot, and we have 15 minutes. And Kaylee, do you think we should open up for questions, or do you have questions yourself?
We can open up for questions. So if you have one, you can either unmute your mic or raise your hand.
I have a question. I was wondering if most nukes are treated with however they treat them, with different products for mites and such. Won't that be in your hive when you buy a nuke then, or can you buy a treated hive or a treated nuke and put it into your hive?
So the wax that's in a treated colony will retain some of that, and the bees that are, so bees life cycle is about 6 weeks for the worker bees. The queen will remain in the hive for 3 to 5 years unless you change her. And so if she's been exposed to those chemicals, then she will have potentially problems with her fertility and her longevity, and so will her offsprings. The wax can retain some of those treatments. So if you buy a nuke that's been treated, you might have residue in there as well. What I really recommend personally is getting bees that have not been treated, that have been raised without chemicals. And I know only 2 right now I know only 1 breeder in Texas that's a bee weaver that has local resilient survivor stock that sell nukes that are untreated. And we do as well, because I'm at Hays County Beekeepers Association, but I'm also Bee Mindful, and we have treatment-free bees. And I don't know if anybody else, I think 2 Hives Honey in Austin also has treatment-free bees. So that's definitely a good question.
Well, I did get bees from Maine that were top bar bees, but they were in a package, and they absconded in about probably just as soon as the queen released. She just took half of them and left.
Oh yeah, that happens a lot with a package because they don't really like being, thrown into those packages, and they're really stressed out, and then they don't always like they get put into empty boxes. And so the queen will pick up and with the bees and leave. Usually that happens a lot. If you put it on the queen excluder and the queen cannot get out, the bees will try to abscond, but they won't leave her behind, so they'll come back. And they might do that a couple of times. But with the queen excluder, you have to wait either until they've built enough wax comb and for the queen to have laid in them to really help them getting anchored onto that hive, or you can give them existing comb, especially with brood babies in there, and they usually don't leave them there. But that's why if you're going to buy bees, I think it's more cost efficient to get a nuke.
But aren't most nukes that are in not the Langstroth, but what's the other kind of hive?
Tabar?
Not the horizontal, vertical hive. Most nukes in my area are not built for a top bar hive.
Correct. So that's a little bit of the issue, unless you find, like, we produce tabar nukes, right? And not many people do that. So if you don't have somebody that sells tabar nukes in your area, that becomes more of a matter of catching a swarm or using a package or baiting the hive. And in all three cases, it's kind of hard to keep them there, especially for the package, if you don't have a queen excluder entrance, a little disc that you turn around. So it's the other thing that you can do is use an adapter. There you can build one, or you can find, it's a little bit more cumbersome, but you can have a Lang to top bar adapter in techniques where you can get the bees to slowly build into the top bar. It takes a lot of time. It's a little bit more complicated. Now, Les Crowder has been known to take Lang frames from a nuke and lay them sideways into the end of the top bar with a little bit of spacer to make sure that the bees can get through on all sides of the combs. And then he closes it and he lets them start building on the bars as they expand. And that's another way to do that. But except for like setting up a package or catching a swarm and putting it in there, it all takes the time for the bees to transition over from the Lang frames to the bars.
So you're saying there's an entrance that you can get for your hive that would exclude the queen from coming out?
Yes, I have one here. I'm going to show you. So this is, by the way, I was going to mention, let me kind of do my computer, bring this closer and aim my computer so that you can see what I'm doing here. Oops. I'm seeing my image backwards. There we go. This is a mini top bar hive, so it's not as long. It's just kind of a
demo,
a little box. But let me see. This is one of the little excluders that I'm talking about. You can get those. It's called a disc entrance reducer. You can find those on eBay. You can find those on Amazon, and they're really cheap. There's some metal and there's some plastic. Since I'm here, I was going to show you the bars are just kind of, let me bring it up. There we go. Some of them can have cleats to help with the parallelism, to make sure that they build really straight.
Yeah.
And most of the bars are actually just a flat bar, just kind of a piece of wood, right? It's just really
no starter
easy.
strip. With no starter strip.
I'm sorry, I can. What is it?
With no starter strip on them.
No, especially once they've started building. Like if you have a few combs to start with, they should start building parallel to it. And there's management practices where you can turn those if they start cross combing, but it's really It's really, this is just kind of bars, and there's nothing else.
Yes.
That's what forms the roof of your colony.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think that's kind of what I was. Anybody else has questions?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Hi. Can you tell me a bit more about what your temperatures are like in winter over there, and therefore how much insulation you need and use?
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear what you said.
What are your temperatures like in winter over there, and what levels of insulation do you put on your hive?
Oh, insulation. Okay, so my hives are this thickness. They're 1.5 thick, right? Actually, it's this way, this thickness. So they're really thick, and that provides a lot of insulation between the body and the bars, where the sun, even if you were to not have a lot of shade over the bars, which you do with the corrugated tin or the metal roof, that would take a while to get through that depth of wood, right? So that provides a certain level of insulation just based on the thickness of the wood. The other thing that you can do, and if you look right here at the top right of this image, you can put a bag of burlap with straw inside if you're in a cold climate, straight over those bars, and then put the rain cover over it. And you can also drape some burlap bags over the body of the hive, just making sure the bees can get in and out, and it provides a wind break as well. But honestly, with a 2-inch lumber, which is, by the way, a lot cheaper than the 1-inch lumber, it actually is very well insulated, and we have no problems even in colder climates. And while you guys are thinking about our questions, I'm going to show you the teaching apiary that we have here in Austin has tabar hives. It also has all kinds of different hives that we use to teach the comparison between the various types of beekeeping. So we do have the Langstroth, we do have tabar hives, we have this type that's a European, Russian deep frame horizontal hive that's called the Layens hive. We have Wari hives with windows. We have a slow flow kind of a hive, and then we have long lang, which is basically the mix of Langstroth frames with a horizontal management. And we're working on getting a Slovenian AZ hive, which is basically a vertical hive, but where you're pulling the frames out to the side without having to lift boxes.
I have a question about swarm traps. I have a question about swarm traps. We have like 40 acres, and we're in Minnesota, and we've been trimming out trees and getting brush taken care of, and we ran into several, well, one tree for sure that had bees in it. I think it was from our queen that absconded because it wasn't a very big hive. And how can you catch those with a swarm trap? I've tried to use lemongrass oil and wax, and
So they're in a tree, right?
Well, yes.
So it's highly unlikely that they will decide to leave the tree so that they can get into your box, no matter what kind of baiting that you do. However, every year the superorganism casts what we call a reproductive swarm, which basically divides itself, sends the old queen with a bunch of the bees in search of a new cavity, while the remaining bees are left with the brood and food, and new queens coming in. They're making new queens. So it's kind of like it renews the genetics of the existing one in the tree, and then sends out the old queen. And that's what you might be able to catch. So depending on the season, if you have a swarm trap not too far away from that tree colony, and you use lemongrass oil or old comb, or propolis on the walls that you can spray. You can dilute that in alcohol and then spray it on the inside to kind of make it smell like propolis. Then if you're lucky, that swarm that's been cast by the tree hollow colony will take shelter into your box. However, that's really unlikely. The other thing that you can do is get a removal specialist beekeeper that's going to come in and do what we call a 4-step scond, and he or she will basically coax the bees that are in the tree hollow to get out and abandon their nest because it becomes uninhabitable. And it's a little traumatic. What they're going to do is they're going to drill holes throughout the tree to reach the cavity and then pump some smoke and get the queen and all the bees to get out because they're like and at that point they get that queen in the queen clip. You can put it in your box and all the bees are going to come in, and obviously you're losing the comb and the brood that's in the tree, but that's one way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so you mentioned I could put 2 colonies into one top bar hive, but I put 1 colony in there and my box is about full. So what happens if I have a really strong colony that just builds everything up?
Okay, so that's great question. So basically, when you're going for like things like ag exemption, it makes sense, or when you get started and your colonies are not very big, to have 1 in each of the 2 sides of a double colony, a hive. However, you're entirely correct. As colonies get established, and if you want to grow them even bigger for honey production, because that's going to increase your honey production the bigger the colony is, then you can remove that partition. You can move one of the colonies into a bigger box, remove that partition, and let the remaining colony grow into that single taba hive. Of course, you're going to need to have extra bars to close that hole that you removed when you took away the second colony. But that's one way to do it. Also, something that Les Crowder does that's really very much part of sustainable beekeeping is that he's going to do what he calls 2 to 3 splits, meaning he's going to use that double colony to grow bees instead of collecting honey, and he's going to wait for them to get a little crowded in each of those 2 sections of the hive, and at that point they're going to start swarming procedures, and he's not going to split just the one on one side to another one, that's called a 1 to 2 split, but he's going to take a little bit of combs from both sides and the queen and just make a split that way, and then the remaining bees will regrow what's been taken. So it's a way to make a more sustainable, less traumatic way to expand the number of colonies that you have. Does it make sense?
Thank you.
Anybody else has questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
We have 5.72 acres. Will most counties accept the 0.72 for the homestead and the rest of the 5 acres for the bees?
Which county are you in?
Williamson.
Williamson. So that's a very good question. So what I can tell you is that you can work with your central appraisal district assessor. You got to talk to them and ask them. I got qualified on an ag exemption with a 1/4 of an acre for the homestead. So I talked to them and they're like, yeah, sure. But it depends really on your tax assessor. So go talk to them and ask them, just tell them, look, my house is going to be really concentrated on this much space, and I'm going to use everything else for the beekeeping activities. And they might work with you. They might not. It really depends. It's their discretion. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost anything for you to go and ask them. And it doesn't even cost anything for you to try to fill your application that way. So when you file your application the first year, just say I've got 0.75 for my homestead, and then I've got 5 acres for the minimum requirements, and see if they bite.
Okay, well, I have ducks also on the property.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was going to go with horizontal hives.
Okay.
Oh, and my other question is, what about the tree concentration? We have about half the property is really heavy in trees. Is that going to hinder the open space exemption?
No, not at all. So bees forage in a radius of 1 to 3 miles usually. So they don't really stick around your property to start with. Now, you might have to show that you're planting for your bees or doing, some clearing of cedar or some activity. And again, it depends on your tax assessor for the land. So the bees, if you're in a good forage area, you're going to be lucky. Personally, your bees are going to thrive. If you're in a poor forage area where there's a lot of trees that don't produce any kind of pollen or nectar for the bees, then you might have to emergency feed them and just kind of keep them on life support. But the tax assessor herself or himself doesn't really care about that, except for the fact that they might ask you for a planting map of your property, which they do in Hays County.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else has questions?
Yes, Natalie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I took your top bar hive building video class.
Oh, good.
And I did get the packaged bees back in April. They did abscond. They had cross-combed really badly, and I tried to rectify that. So I figured I better wait till next spring to continue. I'd like to join your Hays County group.
Good.
Are they mostly top bar people or no, I don't know. Okay.
So no, Les Carter and I prefer the top bar hives. So that's what we talk about it a lot. And we've got a lot more people that are interested in that because it is easier, cheaper, and just kind of accessible on a low budget. And it's good for natural beekeeping, but we do have a lot of people that are keeping their bees in vertical hives, and we teach to that as well. We just don't promote treatments.
Okay, I understand, and that is exactly the way I would like to continue. Perhaps I could find somewhere about getting a nuke instead of a package, or 2 nukes come springtime.
So talk to us. We're not selling a lot of them this coming spring because we're trying to grow the number of our colonies, but we might have some that we can sell, and you can get on the waiting list and just kind of see what we can come up with. Okay. I was going to say, before I forget, when we talk about horizontal top bar hives, go for 19-inch dimension because they're the bars are longer and the combs are shallower. So in the heat of Texas, they are much more stable. Okay. If you go with a 17-inch bar, it's deeper and there's less attachment for the comb to be sturdy, so they collapse a lot easier. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, when you have a top bar hive and you got comb that's stuck to that bar, whatever the size, you have to manage the bar vertically only, like this. If you do pivot like this, sometimes, let me see. So if you pivot like this with the weight of the honey, sometimes that comb might fall. So it makes for a different style of manipulation. Questions? So if you have more questions, feel free to contact me here or at the Hays County Beekeepers Association website. So I forgot to put this would have been great right there. So hayscountybeekeepers.com, and the email address is here, hayscountyba@gmail.com, and there's a phone number for you guys as well. So don't hesitate to contact us, whichever way you do this. and we'll be happy to answer all and any questions you may have and point you in the right directions for easy beekeeping on a budget.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you. Well, you guys have a good day. Thank you for having me on today. I always like being on the Dripping Springs Library series for education, public education. And if you have other topics you're looking for, just let me know, and Kaylee and I will work on that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day.